Yeah, it was. I'm not really sure where this is going to go.
What it's funny. It was kind of a crap game, but I think there's actually quite a lot to talk about. Least of all, sort of mainly outside of the game.
we might have to be careful about that one. Alleged.
I think, given the fact that we are in the US, we have to be less careful because the people over the good old freedom of speech bullshit over here doesn't seem to
freedom of speech bullshit. I love it.
Yeah.
Where are we at here? Oh god. So I'm just loading up the old websites here.
No, you're fine. Do you see Newcastle have gone 1-0 up already?
I'm trying to put the game on in front of me, but because NBC force you to have 500 apps and don't tell you where they broadcast it, I'm finding it's on the NBC Sports app, because why wouldn't it be?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, one's going to be on Peacock, and then we'll switch it. Just make a decision.
Yeah, I'm sure every American listener is feeling you in the gut right now. I hate getting up in the morning. I haven't had a chance to check, so I just go downstairs and I just gamble on YouTube TV or NBC.
You just have to take a punt at it. And I'm also annoyed on the East Coast here. They're not showing the Browns versus the undefeated Cardinals at 4 p.m. because they're showing bowling. Bowling
is quite fun, though. I mean,
Yikes.
One vote for bowling.
That's probably going to be it. So
yeah, for real.
That is strange.
Well, welcome to episode 145. I am joined as always by Adam and Craig. How are you, boys?
Very good, thank you. How about you?
I'm all right.
I had a baby shower yesterday for my my upcoming daughter being born in December, so I'm feeling a little worse for the wear. And then had to watch a rerun of our game at 11 p.m. last night, which was just not what you want to do when that was the result.
Yeah, no. We've obviously had the international break off. How were your international breaks? Before we get on to news that broke in the international break, we'll touch on that after. But how was your week off?
Yeah, it was pretty good. I actually had a couple of my friends come and stay with me this week. So they managed to get into the the US, before everything changes, from the restrictions perspective. So week off work as well. Seeing some very old friends for the first time in a few years. So I can't complain too much.
I weirdly did the same thing. I had a friend over as well. So it was good time. But you were back in the motherland, Josh.
I was, yeah. It sounds like we all had good timing for an international break to actually do kind of good stuff instead of just worrying.
Yeah, better than some people. International break.
Yeah,
for sure.
It was great. Didn't do a great deal while I was over there because it was only for a week, and it was mainly just to see family and go to a wedding on the Saturday. But yeah, it was excellent. I will say. And for the American listeners and the UK listeners, they're going to get a bit of a shock to the system here because I feel like I've just read nothing but people upset on both sides of the pond. But and a lot of it is now defunct because we're at a stage where it can be. But it is mind blowing how organized and structured the COVID stuff is over there. Like, it puts the US to shame heavily. And I know the UK, a lot of people who live in the UK say it's a mess. You have no idea what a mess is. Like, your infrastructure that is clearly being dismantled right now because they're kind of, you're coming towards like that point where they think it's shining out a little bit. It's still a lot better than what it was here at its best.
There wasn't anything here, right? I think it was hard to compete with just chaos.
Yeah. There was nothing. There was nothing. Yeah. Just flags and guns and masks being burned.
Pretty much. Yeah.
And that was in the blue states, not alone the red.
Right, yeah. That's fair too. Yeah. What a weird time.
It is a weird time. But yeah, it was great. The only thing I will say is when you're both traveling home, because I know that Craig, you're thinking about it sooner than later. Heathrow is an absolute mess. They are not structured or organized at all. They have all of the, the scan machines where you like scan your little face and stuff. All of those are closed. So it's you have to go through a person. Every single person has to go through a person, and you've already had like a test, you're not having to have one, whatever. Like, I don't understand why you have to see a person. You've already done all the documentation, like you've had it before you get onto the plane, but they have to see you all again. And it was awful. It was awful.
The one place that you want to be super organized.
Yeah.
Very strange. I've always liked those machines. Sometimes they don't work for anyone, but I never have a problem with them. They tend to help me quite a lot. But it's strange that they're forcing you through a human being, every single person.
Yeah, it sucked. Well, there was two big pieces of news in the international break. One very much regarding the Albion, one kind of. And let's touch on the first one, the Newcastle takeover. It's been coming for a long time. It's definitely pertinent to us because whenever we're in a relegation battle, they're generally down there with us, or were. They're probably not going to be in the future. And it's a team that we generally have a lot of luck against. We do pretty well against them, especially under Potter. I feel like our goal difference is probably plus 12 against them over the course of 4 games. Newcastle fans absolutely delighted. Apparently, no one will ever know the struggles of supporting a team under Mike Ashley. And the big evil Mike Ashley is gone, and the humble, loving, and giving Saudis now run the club. How are we feeling about that? And I know the US are great allies, so I suppose we should be careful. But I'm sure Joe Biden isn't going to be listening to this anytime soon. So how are we feeling about this Newcastle takeover?
Well, the pictures that are coming out with Newcastle fans wearing the Saudi headgear and things like that, it's just obscene. What are you doing? I guess I'll come at this from a slightly different take because I think a lot of people are outraged for good reason. But for me, the ship has already sailed. We've already set a precedent in the Premier League that nation state entities can buy teams. They have done. They continue to do so. I mean, how do you think Roman Abramovich got his money? Sort of hardworking 9-to-5 job? No, he capitalized on the fall of the Soviet Union and did some pretty unsavory things, which will come out at some point in the future, I'm sure. The governments of both our respective home country and the country that we live in the US right now, both facilitate money and do a ton of stuff with Saudi Arabia. So why should the Premier League be held to a different standard than the country that it's essentially represented by in the UK? So I think it's bad for football, but it's because we hold football in this idyllic idea that it's this fan-run situation, and it's just not anymore. It's the height of capitalism now, and not to sound too socialist or anything like that, but that's just the way it is. This is just another stage in it, and I think you just have to appreciate, as a fan of Brighton Football Club, that we have someone in charge that actually likes the club and goes in and sits in the away zones with the fans. Can you imagine the Saudi representative sat there with the tsunami? No, obviously not. I think we just need to be thankful for what we have, frankly.
Yeah, I think just building on that as well, I guess, yeah, if you're going to be upset or annoyed with, this sort of takeover of Newcastle, you need to be annoyed with the Man Cities and the Chelseas too, because you have to hold them to the same standard. So one thing, obviously, a brand new term has been coined in terms of sports washing and being able to mask certain things that you're doing in foreign lands and bringing this to the forefront so that you can maybe get away with it. But it has got people talking in terms of, what is and what isn't right. The German methodology in the Bundesliga always comes up when something like this happens. But to Adam's point, it's nothing new. We've seen it numerous times. This is just another one that we're seeing. But yeah, I think just to again echo that. We need to be very, very happy and very blessed with what we've got, and that is someone that truly supports the club and handles it very well. So I think it's important to note, but it's nothing new at the same time.
Yeah, no, I pretty much agree with you both. I think my biggest point of not frustration at all, but just kind of like, are you serious? Is the Newcastle fans saying that like nobody knows what they went through. To then get in bed with the Saudis is quite funny. But it's exactly as you said, Adam. It's that constant, build on build on build of that kind of peak capitalism stuff. And we keep hearing on all of the Five Lives and the Talk Sports and the Sky Sports, all these pundits, and they've been saying it since Chelsea. So they've been saying it since Abramovich. The bubble's going to burst. The bubble's going to burst. It's not. Because we're now, if you'd have told them, even when Abramovich took over, okay, well, now nation states are just going to buy clubs. Like, they would think you were taking the piss then. Like, I don't see any point in time that this business bubble bursts unless there's a financial crisis or something like that. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
this is just one of those things that's going to keep going and going and going. And like you said, we're very lucky to have Tony. We're very lucky to have the legacy he already had by virtue of family being in the club as well. And it just so happens he has loads of money, which is really, really helpful. And I think, my stepdad is a Newcastle fan. He was obviously both happy, but like he was in a weird spot because he also accepts that they're not a great group of people. But he was saying, and he said the other day, if I had the choice of having Saudi Arabia or a Newcastle Tony Bloom, I would pick a Newcastle Tony Bloom every single day. And
yeah,
I think that's good perspective. He's 71 years old. He's watched them be really good and really shit. So like when you have people like that from a reasonable point of view, I think that speaks a great deal towards just how good Bloom is from the outside looking in too.
I think in terms of how it kind of maps back to Brighton as well, as you said a little bit earlier, Newcastle typically in and around the area in which we sit in the table once you get into the towards the end of the season. It's going to be interesting to see how disruptive they become, because as we've seen with all the other clubs that get these massive potential injections of cash, it sometimes takes a little bit of time to move them to the destination they want to get to. You remember when Man City had the takeover, like they started out and made some splashes. Robinho was the big one on the final day. That was that big point that no one expected. But they were signing Gareth Barry and players like this. So it's not like tomorrow Newcastle are going to turn around and start to sign Mbappe. They're still going to be in and around the area in terms of competing for talent that we're going to be looking at as well. So I think we still need to be sort of mindful of Newcastle, and if anything, it's a challenge for us in the next 1, 2, 3 years that they'll still be able to poach players in front of us that we're looking at, but now they've just got wads of cash to get them. So frustrating a little bit from our side as well.
I think from another point of view, though, if their recruitment team stays the same, we're not going to be too worried, are we? I mean, if they're going to be splashing the cash on Joel Linton's and people like that en masse, I feel like we can kind of just let them do their thing and see how long it takes for them to have to overhaul. Because like you said, like Robinho, like he never really adapted. And then you've got people that they signed on that first season, like Joe. What did he do? Like appalling. They continued with that recruitment team that had them towards the bottom of the Premier League for a couple of years, and they struggled to improve really until they overhauled the whole system. And Newcastle are a broken club in that respect. Their infrastructure is appalling. Like they have, when you think that we began the journey that we're on now in 2009, and we're starting to see the benefits of that in 2021 and 2020 and 2019. These Newcastle fans, you splash money all you want, but there's a lot of players that are not going to want to move to Newcastle. Not when teams like Arsenal can offer them the same money Like not when teams, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When they can live in London, Newcastle in 4 years might well be a better team than Arsenal. I mean, they could be now, but you know, you know what I mean? Like
I'd rather have Callum Wilson than anyone Arsenal's got at the moment up front.
that is true.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? It's one of those things that they're not in a desirable place in the country. They are not, and that's stupid. But it
with
does
all due
matter.
respect to any listeners that are based up in the northeast, it does matter. But at the same time, we're now talking. You've probably seen those charts that have come out with it, like the potential wealth of the owners. It's orders of magnitude more. Like this investment fund has the ability for a player that, let's say, is valued at £50 million. They can come in and say, we'll pay you 90 million, and they won't care. And the player's agent will go, you're going there.
Yeah.
And that's the difference that it makes. I think what's also going to be sad about this is, and maybe this sort of, so I know we've got to talk about another event that happened in the international break, but it segues a little bit to our opponents this last weekend. If you look at the wealth of Delia Smith and whomever it is that owns Norwich, like, they're absolute minnows. Like, sides like Norwich that get promoted now from the Championship that are now dealing with what is essentially, it was a top 6, top 8. We're eventually going to get to a point where there's a top 10, top 15 clubs that have such a massive disparity in wealth between the bottom clubs in the league and the guys that come up from the Championship, that we're just going to create that Euro league that everyone fought against because it was unfair. We're just going to create it in the domestic league. And I think that's what's really annoying.
And you get I guess it's the same sort of thing, right? Just to add towards that, and what we see over here in the States is that almost that borderline franchise model where you're then going to get to a point where that group at the top isn't ever going to change, and you start seeing adverse effects probably down the pyramid. You know, us, the UK people, are very proud in terms of the pyramid that we have in football and how that works. This is just another stepping stone to completely remove that or make it pretty worthless in the long run. When you do have the Norwiches and the Watfords that come up because they were the best in the second league, only to falter. I know it's the first 8 games, but in terms of you're looking at what Watford did this weekend, you look at Norwich. Yes, we struggled. We'll move on to that. But in terms of 2 points from 8 games, Watford, sort of getting bounced about a bit, beating them comprehensively earlier in the season. There is that disparity now, and it's only going to start getting bigger. It almost feels like we were at the perfect time in when we actually did get promoted and managed to stay up, the last 4 seasons. So that's my worry. I think more than anything, the Newcastle thing is just, another one, as I keep saying. But it's just when it's gonna stop. And what Josh said around, when is that bubble gonna burst? It will burst when there's 15, 16 teams in this league and none of them move.
I think that's well said. So let's move on to the other one, because this one is much more Albion centric. I think it was was it the weekend it happened? Or was it the Friday or so? I think it was kind of...
Whatever was the biggest night in Freshers Week in Brighton is probably how we can pick it out. Yeah.
So, well put. There was an Albion player arrested, confirmed by the club, ongoing investigation, bailed until November 3rd. I am of the belief that there will be, due to the allegations, it's likely to either be cleared or dropped or pursued at that point. It's not likely to go on until, I think it's November the 18th is also the other official date. But from what I can gather, it's liable to be all or nothing once we get to November 3rd. Pretty clear who it was. He's a box-to-box central midfielder with the number 8 on his back, and one of our, if not quite comfortably, our best player in this season and the season gone. We missed him yesterday. I think that much was evident. I think I saw a couple of people online say that if they believe that if Bissouma was available for the last 3 games, we may well currently be sitting top of the league. And I'm hesitant to say that they're wrong, given that we're only a couple of points off. Those couple of points difference may well have made it. He's 24, 25 now. Should be known better. Was in the squad yesterday. I posted a tweet, and I'm sure you probably saw it. It was the poll of what fans thought should happen in terms of whether he should be played, whether he should be in the squad and just left on the bench, or whether he should be out of the squad altogether. I had a couple of people say, why on earth is the middle one an option? That's a stupid option and should never happen. And I responded to them and said, that's exactly the stupid shit that football clubs do. And sure enough, he sat on the bench and didn't involved in the game. Where do you two stand on it? I have an opinion on it, and I'll give you it with no problem at all as well. I'm just curious, where are we sitting here? Because there's a lot of different opinions and a lot of different thoughts and feelings around it. So
I'll go
Over to you, Craig. I'll leave that one to you.
It's such a tough one, isn't it? You know, the poll obviously was very divided anyway, apart from the whole benching. You have to try and just... what most clubs will do is they'll tend to just play it off and say investigation is ongoing and just sort of ignore it, if you like. But, you know, with media outlets and... you know, the outlets such as Twitter, Instagram, etc. It's very hard to ignore, and everything goes along. We saw it unfold in our WhatsApp group in terms of, you know, the bits and pieces of information that were coming out from people, not media outlets. And you can make your decision and make your opinion up based on, you know, what other people have seen. I think the tendency is to just trying to alleviate the situation by not talking about the player, not bringing any attention to that player. I think that's probably the justification behind not leaving him out completely, because that adds fuel to the fire, but also not starting him and ignoring the situation completely. I can see how they've come to that decision. Personally, I mean, it's a tough one. I don't think there is a right and a wrong answer. It's a very grey area, but I don't think I would have included him in the squad. And I would have just sort of kept him away. He's been off for a couple of games in terms of injuries as well. So it wouldn't have brought, you know, a massive red flag, but I would have just not had him in the squad.
Yeah, you can see why they did it. You don't want to make it seem like the club sort of an admission of guilt by leaving him out of the match squad. Not starting him would go too far the other way. So it's a very fence-sitting process, it feels like, from the club. Obviously, we don't know anything, as we talked about. This everything is speculation at the moment. I think we're all aware enough to know that there is no smoke without fire and all this kind of jazz. So something happened. We don't know what it is. Who are we to say what happened? As a fan of the club, as a fan of Basuma, the player, and seemingly the person, from what he presents on social media, he seems like a good person, obviously a stunning footballer. Who knows what he's done, but whatever it is now got a question mark against his name for the foreseeable future. That puts any moves that he has to larger teams at risk. It puts him as a question mark amongst the fan base. And it puts our season in a question mark, with a question mark next to it. As you said, he has a massive impact on games. He is the best player at the club. From a non-footballing perspective, if he has done something, it's my hope that he is dealt with the full force of the law. If he did, in fact, do something that was guilty or untoward. Because at that point, you put the football aside. It's a shame from a footballing standpoint and as a fan, but if he committed a crime, he should deserve the punishment that comes with it.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? It's tough because, you know, it's obviously all speculation. We don't know. I think, just personally, I think the signs that he is in the squad at all points to a fact that the club may know more than we. Of course, they know more than we do. That goes without saying. That, you know, the police will have had some kind of communication with the team or with the higher ups in the club, the legal team at bare minimum, as to what this situation looks like. I am optimistic that whatever those allegations were are probably not as heavy as what could have been, given that he was arrested in a nightclub. That gives you immediate red flags. But given at the same time, we're in a period of time where the police are under immense speculation, rightly so, given the Sarah Everard murder, all of that coming back up with the sentencing and the problems there, and just around the world, really. They probably acted quickly and heavily and appropriately, because that's something that they need to be doing these days with a high-profile situation like this. It's tough for me when I'm on social media and I'm seeing a lot of people hanging him out to dry already. I am a fan of his, but at the same time, I think from a legal perspective, and it probably is because I was doing that at university for so many years, like the innocent until proven guilty stuff is so important that trial by social media is so problematic just across everything, right? It doesn't matter whether it's him or whoever else, except for Benjamin Mendy. It seems pretty clear him and Deshaun Watson I will not include in that caveat, because when you have 26 people accusing you or you're raping people while you're on bail, I would say that's probably a little bit different. But when for the majority of the cases, where it's not clear cut, I think a lot of people online are kind of saying, I don't want him at the club ever again, even if he's not guilty, because he's just paid them off. That sort of stuff, like you can't be thinking that way. You've got to trust in the law. If you don't, what's the point in dealing with it in the first place? I'm optimistic that he's going to get cleared. And that's not just for him, but for the girl in question too, right? If he is cleared, whether that happened or not, it probably means that she's not as affected as she could have been. Who knows? Do you know what I mean? So it's tough. I hope he's back soon. November 3rd is almost definitely going to be the time that we find out one way or another. But as you said, and I support that 110%, if he is found in any way guilty of this, he should be dealt with the full force of the law. He should be dealt with strictly and efficiently by the club. I would personally be happy never to see him play again, despite how much I would love him from my footballing brain to see him play again. From my moral standpoint, I wouldn't want him to put on a blue and white stripe shirt ever again. So it's a rough one because it just so happens to be our best player. When I heard a player had been arrested outside a nightclub, another band came to mind. I'll be honest with you. I'm sure that you can both do the deductions on who that would have been. That I'm definitely not going to go into just in case, but it wasn't him. It was Bissouma. So
10 seconds on a soapbox very quickly, because the social thing is stupid. It's okay to both feel disappointed in Bissouma, the footballer, and the person and the situation, and also then be hoping he is dealt with effectively from a legal standpoint, from a policing standpoint. There is you are able to think like that. You don't have to either hang him out to dry or say he did nothing wrong because you're a fan and you're just deluded about the actions that could have occurred. It's okay to think on both sides. Yeah,
completely agree.
That's well said. I'm glad you did that, because in today's world, there isn't a lot of room for that.
It's just binary. That's it. You take one side, go with your tribe, and that's it.
Yeah, and I think Craig nailed it. It's a grey area, right? We all have different feelings, but I think we're all very much united on the fact that if found in any way guilty, he should be punished heavily.
Absolutely.
Yep. That's just how it is. Onto the game itself, onto what we actually want to discuss in terms of Albion 28 minutes.
I don't know if want is the right words. But
yeah.
That's a good point. The Albion lined up with the exact same team they played Arsenal with. Of course, no Bissouma in the squad. Tariq Lamptey on the bench again. Mwepu returned to the bench. And Danny Welbeck now out for quite some time with a hamstring injury. He's had hamstring surgery. Who knows what that means? Tariq Lamptey was out 9 months with that. Nobody seems to know exactly whether that means Welbeck will also be out for that amount of time. Potter has certainly not ruled him out for the season, and I feel like they would have if it was that severe. So who knows what that return looks like, but he is also a great deal older than Tariq Lamptey and has had plenty of injuries in his time. The starting 11, Bissouma aside, because I think we're all let's just forget about that for now, because he was essentially just there to be there. I agree. What changes would you like to make, or were you happy with that starting 11?
I think I was happy. We did really well against Arsenal, and we talked about that quite a lot. I think tactically it was a bit different, but we'll go into that in a little bit. But I don't think I would have made any changes or, in that respect, alter anything that we were doing, because I thought the Arsenal performance was that good without the goals. I was, hoping that the international break for a few of them, would definitely help. But I wouldn't have made any changes personally. So I wasn't surprised nor, disappointed.
We speculated last week, didn't we, about what the lineups would be if players could come back. And I think the most disappointing thing that we saw here was Webster not even being part on the bench. And we'd hoped he would be back for this. I think if he were fit, he would have gone straight back into the team. But outside of that, with Welbeck gone and with the depth that we had on the bench, when Basuma is out, it's now quite clear that Potter wants to play with this sort of three central midfielders that, while none of them are particularly defensively minded or capable, will throw some bodies at the problem and structure it in that way. So I think in many ways, the team sort of picked itself in that regard, because you played the three central players that could play there. You don't really have a ton of others on the bench that can play in those positions unless you move some people around a little bit or go more attacking and bring in McAllister, which you did towards the latter part of the game.
Yeah, I think personally, I would have preferred to have seen Veltman in the back three and Lamptey start. Obviously, Potter didn't think he was ready for that, and I will obviously see.
He didn't look it either, Josh. He didn't look quite there.
He looked a little bit slower, a little bit. And it was funny because when he was tracking back, you could see he wasn't sprinting. It was that kind of, and it was still quicker than half the team anyway. But it was, it was that half-hearted stuff. And if that's the case, I have no problem with it. It was, it was evident on the fact that he came on that he wasn't quite back to what he should be. And why should he be? He's at 9 months out. That would have been my only change from the beginning. Hindsight says that was probably a bad decision, so I'm glad he didn't do it. But the game itself was an odd one. It was very much what we've been watching for the past 24 months, maybe 18 months, like a year and a half, 2 years under Potter since we've been playing against the lesser teams, so to speak. And we've very much been in and amongst those lesser teams for most of that time. So there's no disrespect to them. We come up against these teams and they put, today, or rather yesterday especially, they put every single player behind the ball except for two. And they sat on the edge of their box, every single one of them, and made it very difficult to break them down. We dominated possession, 65% possession, dominated them in just about every facet of the game, really, barring set pieces, which is annoying because that's something we're generally quite good at. Pukki and Sargent gave us more problems than I've seen many strikers this season give us with their decision to just chuck the ball over the top. And it was a tactic that I felt Potter didn't adapt to very quickly, or even at all at times. Why do you think that was so effective? Because I felt there was a lot of times where Sargent especially was just in acres of space. Craig, you mentioned tactical changes or tactical differences to the last one. What do you think it was about that game that left him wide open where players like Smith Rowe and Saka were not?
Yeah, I think obviously we've mentioned that Norwich have sort of come out to this game very defensive in terms of, getting 11 men behind the ball. I'll redact that. I don't mean like defensive in that, they got back when they needed to. And given that we had a lot of the possession, that means that they were back a lot. That's the part of parcel. I thought Josh Sargent was actually very good. I thought his touches meant that, he had a couple of sloppy ones, but you had one in the first half with a little Zidane turn and, he's in and behind. I think it's just pace in terms of what Sargent brought to that and making quite intelligent runs from one centre back to the other, so that the tracking was a little bit off. But I think you're right in terms of Potter didn't adapt to it, and it took a while for us to figure that out. I don't know whether we just wrote that down in terms of we'll get the hang of this eventually, and putting trust in the players to just alleviate that decision or mitigate it in any way that they could. But it's a very good question. I don't know why it didn't change as quickly as we thought.
here's what I think happened with it is with this tactic where you're not playing the full three forwards, if you want to call it that, with Welbeck out, you're not starting Connolly. You're playing more of that 3-5-2 setup. To do that effectively, so you're not just bogged down, the wing backs have to push up like crazy. And we saw that with Cucurella. He almost became that pseudo left winger for a lot of the time when we had some possession. We saw Gross push up. We saw Moda push up because they want to do that. They're not that fast. Lallana sat back a bit more. Not really a defensive midfielder. Veltman would push up on the right side. That meant that as soon as we didn't complete our move, scuff a shot, get intercepted, whatever it was, the counter's on. Cucurella all the way up the pitch. Who's back? Adam Lallana, Dan Burn, Shane Duffy, and Lewis Dunk. Sargent's going to win that foot race every time. And then Pookie can hold up the ball and play him in. And that's the problem a little bit with this setup because of the personnel that we have to put in there because of injuries or because players aren't being picked. When we lose possession high up the pitch, we can be counted on really easily.
Goes without saying that a certain player would have fixed that issue. I think Bissouma catches them and pretty much nullifies Sargent and or Pookie at any one time, and then you've got two centre halves at minimum able to focus on the other one. The Lana, Gross, and Moda, we've talked about them pretty much every game they've started together in, or at least when Moda came on at halftime. I think that time as well. They are very lightweight in that midfield, with probably the exception of Moda. In terms of the physical battle, the Lana and Gross are not players that are built to be able to do that. Do you think there is anybody in the squad, barring Bissouma, that you think could come in and replace one of those players right now and make a difference? Or is it a case of just hoping and praying we've got what we've got?
I don't think so. We talked about this a couple of weeks back. Well, you can't replace Bissouma for one, but we don't have an out-and-out defensive midfielder now. I think my first choice would have been Alzate. Well, he's not coming back anytime soon, and we sent everyone else out on loan. So for me, no. I think we're going to be forced into playing these tactics a little bit more. With Webster coming back, it might allow you to move some pieces around a bit more. He might at home games switch back to that different tactic so that Connolly pushes up further and we play a little bit more aggressive. But look at the bench yesterday. The way he got more attacking was to bring Lamptey in for Veltman. It's an attacking switch, but obviously quite far back. Solly came on for Cucurella. I believe. Oh, no, yeah, he did. And then McAllister came on from Moda, which is an attacking movement. I don't know what happens in a game where you get the goal and you need to get more defensive. I don't know who comes in then.
I can't see it either. Just in terms of what we've got available there, and Mwepu's had a very timid start in terms of what we're looking at there from an attacking perspective and a box-to-box perspective as well. But again, he's no Bissouma. He's not, a CDM in that role. You're spot on. I mean, in terms of when we do have Webster back, where does that go in terms of who comes out? And, because I'll say defensively, I thought Dan Burn was obviously great yesterday as well, in terms of saving a few very good counter-attacking options for Norwich. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't know what changes. I don't know who comes in to try and take control of that deep midfield area.
And this is where you miss Ben White a little bit, because Ben White could play that role. Was he great at it? No. Was he better than Lallana, Gross, or Moda? Yes. I'm wondering whether Potter will start experimenting with, because we'll now with Webster back, we'll have a surplus of players that can capably play centre back. I mean, one or two of those players will miss out each week. Can one of those play a little bit ahead of those centre backs and slot in as a more defensively minded midfielder? I don't know what he'll do there, but I do feel like we're one injury away from this being challenging.
I'm glad you said that, because my next point, I thought I was going to get buried. But I do think there is someone who can do that. And I think that's Joel Veltman.
Right.
His comfort on the ball and his ability to pass the ball, he's very, very good. I think if there is any of those players, when you look at Shane Duffy, Dan Burn, Lewis Dunk, Webster, and Joel Veltman, I feel like there is one of those players that stands out as someone who I would dare to try make a makeshift central defensive midfielder. And to me, that man is Veltman. I wouldn't put Burn there. It's just not something I would see working. The left back was something that we fell into by total surprise, and it's been great, but it's not, he's not a central defensive midfielder. Duffy, definitely not. He's came back and has been phenomenal, but central defensive midfielder, he is definitely not. Dunk is far too important at the back. And Webster, I'm a massive fan of him. I think we all are. But there's just something about him that I wouldn't feel as comfortable as Veltman in that central defensive midfield role, especially with Lamptey coming back. And it is going to take time, but with Lamptey coming back, he would be the one I would dare push into that central defensive midfield role.
It's not like like Potter's not going to experiment, right? We've seen it before. We saw it the first game of the season, putting Webster right back. The only thing with Veltman that I would be worried about is his proneness for a yellow card. Like, got it 14 minutes in, and changed that left hand side, because you have to be careful for 75 minutes of that game now. I thought it was a very silly challenge to make 15 minutes in. If you're facing someone 1-to-1 on that right-hand side compared to 2 or 3 people coming through the middle, he'll rack up a serious number of fouls, because I say he's a very good tackler, but he is prone to a yellow card or 2.
8 yellow cards in yesterday's game. Scrappy affair.
Let's talk about that, actually, because I wanted to bring that up later on, but this is the perfect time for it. The aggression charts in the Premier League, the booking charts. Villa are in 5th with 17 yellow cards. Southampton are in 4th with 15 yellows and a red. Burnley are in 3rd, unsurprisingly, with 18 yellow cards and no reds. Leeds are 2nd with the bookings with 17 yellows and a red. And Albion are out in front. 0 red cards, but 22 yellows. What is it about this team that is producing that amount of bookings? Do you think it's a lack of discipline? Or do you think that we are... For me, I think it's a way of adapting to the fact that we are going to be counted on by the lesser teams.
Completely agree.
This is their way of dealing with it. They are thinking, we will take the extra cards and the extra bookings for those cynical challenges where they stop those breaks, because there were so many games last season where we took a win to a draw or a draw to a loss because of those breaks. And I'm of the opinion that this is an intentional sacrifice that Graham is more than happy to make.
I absolutely agree with it. I think a lot of these we saw this yesterday, a lot of these were tactical fouls, aside from maybe Veltman. But even then, there was a nice little move happening on the break. It goes back to what we talked about a little bit before. Outside of the wing positions, we don't have a lot of pace in the team. Means if you're pushed up, you have a ton of possession of the ball, you're up in the final third, you lose the ball, the other team's running at you. It's a choice that gets made, and I think that's been instilled by Potter on the training ground. Like, take the yellow card, and what that's better than conceding the goal, because we know if we concede, then we put ourselves in the uncomfortable position of coming back and having to score more than the other team, which is not where we want to be, especially based on how clinical we've been in the last 2 games. And
then you get into, I guess, the trade-off there, right? In terms of if we're counteracting the draws, and instead of losses, and like last year, and we're taking those cynical fouls now, you're going to get to those suspensions pretty quickly in terms of Lallana, Duffy. I think at the back we're relatively comfortable in terms of our options. Hayden Roberts is on the bench. Webster's due to come back. I don't mind a few additional yellow cards in that back area, because when you do get 5 yellow cards, someone can swap in and we'll deal with it with relative ease. It's the central midfielders where we're already having a problem, where Lallana's racking up and making a very silly foul yesterday. He didn't need to. He wasn't far back enough, and there wasn't enough danger to warrant it, in my opinion. But split decision, it is what it is. But when you start getting up to this, the 5 yellows in that area, where we're already looking at, a very thin or, a very difficult area to try and replace, or trying to slot in different people, that's where maybe we're going to see those draws that we would have got turn into losses, because we're now missing people in key areas, because we're getting more suspensions due to this tactic. Or I say tactic, quote unquote, because we're not 100%, but we're pretty sure that it's a taught skill that we're saying to take the couple of extra yellow cards to help alleviate the situation in games.
And speaking of fouls, can we talk about what happened in the 22-minute mark, where Mopé, according seemingly to VAR and the referee, decided to fall down of his own accord when he could have run on and just passed it into the net. Why was that not given as a penalty, or am I just on my own here in this opinion?
Baffling to me. Sometimes I think VAR does such a good job in a lot of things, even if it goes against us sometimes, that I try and give it the benefit of the doubt, especially when it's tight decisions like that. Not so much the offsides and stuff like that, but when it's like fouls, red card offenses, stuff like that. And you watch the same footage they watch and you think, there's no good angle here. Like, they're all crap. Like, this is a rough one. And it's same for the NFL. Like, sometimes when you're seeing if they've like crossed the plane, or like if they hit before they go out of bounds, it's like, well, shit, like there's no good angle here. Like, how are they supposed to know? But for the game yesterday, I think there was 3 brilliant angles where you could clearly see the contact that was made. And I think Neil has been the victim of something that is one of my like room 101 football hates, in terms of the things that I wish we could just bin off. And I know I'm not alone on it, because I hear professionals talk about it all the time. The idea that if you stay up or try and stay up, you don't get a foul. Like, you're being encouraged to go down. And that is just absolutely diabolical. And I think Neil tried to stay up. He was clipped. If he'd have gone down on first contact, I think he'd have got a pen without even having to go to VAR. And you should never be a victim of your own, ambition or whatever you'd call it. Like, you should never be a victim of your own play style to try and keep yourself on your feet. That should be applauded, not punished. And you have people like the lad on Arsenal Fan TV calling Mopé a cheat. Well, now he's going to. Now it's a self-fulfilling prophecy now, because you're not giving him decisions when he's trying not to cheat. So now let's just go down on first contact. And is it cheating? No, because contact was made. Is it, gamesmanship? Yeah. Like, it's one of those things that just frustrates the shit out of me, because why are you doing that? Just give the decision. And when you have VAR, it's literally tailor-made for a decision like that.
It comes to that clear and obvious thing again, that we're seeing such a clear divide in last season compared to this season as well, where these sort of decisions aren't being given. And yeah, I don't have a defense for it, because I think, Josh, to your point, there was 3 very good angles. There's no ambiguity there in any way. So why isn't it clear and obvious? What is the excuse there? And I use the term excuse, but what's the justification behind agreeing with the referee's decision there, when the referee was spotty at best yesterday anyway, in terms of what we saw? But when you're going to an assistant referee that has those 3 replays and they're going, no, that's not clear and obvious, it's very strange.
Would have changed the course of the game as well, right? Because one big change that happened in this game is we came out actually firing on all cylinders. The first 10 minutes we looked pretty good, which is very alien to viewing for us. And you just think if we'd have got that penalty, gone ahead, then we can play our game. Then we play our game of comfort possession football. We're not desperate to try and get the goal. We nullify some of the counterattacks. So it's such an annoying situation to have been put into. And then, of course, I don't know what you thought about the switch up between the 2 halves, but we were all over them the first half, and then the second half did not feel like that. But annoying that we didn't get that penalty. I don't understand how they didn't call it.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It changes the whole course of the game because their entire game plan of hitting us on the break is dead and buried then.
Yep.
They're not going to be able to do that. And I don't see them scoring in any other format because they didn't create any major chances barring the ones where we gifted those breaks. And at that point, you know, it's one of those. I mean, we did it last 2 seasons ago where we beat them 1-0 with the Trossard goal. It was almost exactly the same. We scored a goal and just burnt them out for over the course. It was not good to watch, but we got 3 points, and I think it would have been exactly the same. I think in terms of the two halves, I think you're right. Again, like we're putting out 2 very different, well, not very, but quite different performances between the two, and we've really got to work on that. And to add to the last thing with Dan Burn, I thought it was the template perfect version of what Dan Burn is in one player, like in one game. For the first 45 minutes, he was an absolute liability. He was responsible for just about every single Josh Sargent break.
Yeah, he gave one real bad one away. Yeah.
And in the second half, he made 2 challenges that would have like made Bobby Moore clap. Like it
on
was
Pookie, that one on Pookie was incredible.
Just unbelievable. Like it was just so unbelievably timed. And with a lad with legs that long, you're like, it makes it even better because you're like, how you know what I mean? The adjustment you have to make for a lad of that size. It was a frustrating day at the office. We should have got the penalty. I think we would have scored it, and I think we would have gone on to win it. But on the other end of the stick, we didn't get it, and we also got a huge let off with Josh Sargent missing a wide open goal. It's going to be on A Question of Sport in 5 years' time where it's like, what happens next? Like, spot the ball. Because there is no way that should have done anything but go in. I've seen a couple of people post like screenshots of it and some people underneath saying like, especially American fans who are obviously very much behind Josh and a lot of the American players that are playing abroad. You know, it doesn't look as easy as it is. It actually looks easier when you watch it in real time. It was absolutely appalling.
Not only was it just under hit, I think it was also going wide. So in terms of just a massive let off for us, right? And I think even Sanchez was laughing after it as well. And it's just sort of, you get away with that one, and you know, there you go, right? It's that those gilt edge chances in the Premier League and those fine margins that you need, and if you don't take them, you do struggle. For us, incredibly funny. For Norwich fans, you're kicking yourself.
Sanchez has got that in his locker, though, isn't it? We talked about this over the last few weeks, and it's annoying because it felt like in the last few games he'd got some of that out of his system. He looked a bit dodgy in the first couple of games we had, and then he came into himself a bit. That was all on him. That was horrible.
Do you think it's overconfidence?
I don't know. I don't. It's a good question. Perhaps. I mean, you'd expect him to be a confident lad at the moment. Luis Enrique giving him chances with the national team. Like and look, we're keeping clean sheets. It's not like he's not doing his job well between the posts. I get nervous when he comes out.
He's a very smart player too. I don't know if you've ever listened to any of his interviews, but like he's clearly a very clever dude, and he's only young. And I wonder if he tries to be too smart sometimes. I think overconfidence is definitely an option. I just wonder if he, in real time, being behind everybody, was like, Dan Burns being caught out time and time again. I'm going to nullify this. And just his overconfidence then led to him misreading the entire thing. He read the game really well. He made the right read. He just executed it at the total wrong time. And I wonder if that's the overconfidence piece where it's like, yeah, I've got this, no worries.
I know that was right at the end of the first half, wasn't it? And that would have been a tough time to concede a goal, but you would hope then the second half would have come out with a different perspective. But one thing that I did notice from the first half, and I don't know if you guys did as well, was, and although it hasn't actually resulted in anything, so it's a bit weird to say this, but Maupay and Trossard are getting a lot more comfortable playing with one another. as opposed to being in this 3, them as a sort of 2 up top partnership as a 9 and 10, they're putting together some nice little bits of play. Trossard cracked that shot against the bar that was laid back to him from Mope. And Mope's proving to be a very unselfish player time and time again, and putting Trossard and other players in a nice position. And I think it's so easy for us to be like, well, he didn't score. These guys didn't score. They're not doing a good job. But I was really impressed with how they play with one another in the first half.
And I think for Neil, I agree with everything you said, but I want him to keep a little bit of that selfishness.
Mm-hmm.
There was once or twice yesterday I was like, just hit it, because if it bounces off someone or spills, you've got like Moda and Trossard were both ahead of him, and it's like it just needs one spill and it's in. And
yeah,
it's not often, but like, and it's so hard to find that balance. And he's young, and I think he will find it to become like a proper box in the box striker. But like, just I think there was only 2 times yesterday it was like, just hit that one. That's the one you want to hit right now. And he's just not. He's being too generous, and that's something that we've got to, because before that he was being too selfish. He was hitting everything, and he needs to find a balance. But he clearly is working on it and learning, so I'm not too concerned about it.
Yeah.
Elsewhere, just real quick to go off script, not that we have a script. Newcastle United Tottenham has been suspended. I don't know if you are able to watch it at the minute, Adam. I'm not. I just saw it on Twitter. A Newcastle United fan collapsed in the homestand. Region, whatever you say his name, identified the furore and told the ref to stop the game so that things could calm down. And Eric Dyer ran to the dugout and got the defibrillator out and did all of that stuff like so quick. Just brilliant to see. Like, I think, that the Christian Eriksen stuff has clearly reverberated around the footballing world, because that kind of reaction is not one that I would have expected to see prior. You see stuff like that happen sometimes in the stands once every now and again, and you just don't really see much after that. It's just like, oh, that happened, the commentators comment on it, and that's it. Today the game has been suspended, and the players have possibly played a genuine part in saving a person's life. So that's really cool stuff.
Massive.
Incredible. Yeah.
Back on script. Players, man of the match. I have to ask you for one. I can go first if you're struggling.
I've got one. It's Josh Sargent for us.
It's tough. It's tough to argue with it, honestly, because it was such a poor day at the office for him. I've not seen many poor striking performances like that before against us.
I do have a real one though, but you go first. I don't want to steal the thunder.
There's no thunder to steal. I'm gonna go with Dunk.
Yeah, that was it.
And I'll tell you why. He looked like the only defender that didn't get caught out yesterday. He did an awful lot of covering work, and it's not his fault. He's not quick enough sometimes to cover it. He's reading it. He's just not quick enough to get his legs there on a break, and that's not his fault. I thought he was very good yesterday. I thought that without him, we probably would have conceded if we'd have been playing any other centre half there instead. And he once again, provided some danger at set pieces. And I thought he was very good yesterday in what was a rather poor side. Not bad, just poor, just average to poor. I thought Dunk was good in comparison to the rest of them.
Yeah, I'm right there in agreement with you. Dunk was my pick. My backup was Lallana, because I thought he did a really good job in sort of controlling a lot of the play, building up our play. I also, this is a bit cliche to say this, but I thought the fans were amazing. They outsung and were louder than the whole rest of the ground, the Norwich fans. And it was nice to hear that. And I think that although it didn't result in a goal or anything like that, the fact that the year and a half that we had prior to this, it was good to hear them in full voice.
It's still nice to hear. Given this season the fans have been back and bits and pieces. It's always nice to hear, especially when you out sing an entire stadium. I think that where give them their due. It sounds like a cop out, but I think Dunk with second most touches, presses, blocks. I think just what he brought in terms of comfort to the rest of the team and his reading of the game. We always wax lyrical about how good he is on these, and we always say that he goes under the radar, etc. With a sort of I won't say a stalemate, but with a game like yesterday, you can see where he shines now in terms of just what he does, what he brings to the team, and what he brings to the other players as well.
I think what annoys me a little bit is the fact that, and this is the big choir preach, but annoying that he isn't called up ahead of your Connor Codys and your Tyrone Mings and things like that, because he's such a stellar player, especially for us playing sides like Andorra. Like, call him up, see if he can do something for you. I know he's not 24 years old and Southgate likes to think towards the future, but he's a heck of a defender on his day.
And if there's a man that you want in the middle of the box to throw his body on the line in a World Cup semi-final for England, I mean, who is him and Maguire? Like, I'm not sure there's any other central defender in the squad that I would have more faith in being able to make that block and save the game than one of those two.
Well, when Maguire is more of his head, isn't it? But big old slab forehead. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys saw one of the Leicester goals yesterday of Maguire just standing there, but I'll send it to you afterwards. I think it's just a good off-topic point to make in terms of one of the goals was him just standing there. I think the quote was, "This is what £80 million gets you."
You've got to think as well. Like, in addition to that, Maguire's he's become a little bit of a parody at this point, because obviously he starts for England, but with Stones isn't even playing for City at the moment. So Gareth has got to think about what's going to happen. Do you play a pairing of players that one doesn't even play week in, week out, and both have a mistake?
It's an interesting one, actually, because we've got Manchester City next. Pep is in full-on fraud mode when it comes to Fantasy Premier League. He has no ideas. It's almost like he really is spinning a wheel this year in terms of what that starting 11 looks like. We've, our last 3 games have all been draws, some better than others. Graham Potter is a manager that I think has an incredible way of putting together such a unique game plan for teams as good as this. And I'm not even going to try and guess what he's going to look like. I'm not even going to try and guess the starting 11. Feel free if you'd like to. We beat Man City and Liverpool this time last year in the games against them last year, head to head. They don't have a striker. What are you hoping results wise from Manchester City next weekend?
Games like this, I go in hoping to not be embarrassed. That's pretty much it. I don't think. I just think it goes back to the conversation we had right at the start of this. Is that, yes, every side, quote unquote, is capable of beating another. We got points out of them last year. I know all these things happen. Pep respects Graham Potter massively, and that's for his tactical nous, as you said. But the fact remains, Man City have spent more on their bench than we have on our entire squad. And at that point, there is a regression to the mean in terms of results that comes out. This is a really long-winded way of me saying anything we get out of this game is a win for me. I think it's probably going to be too soon for Webster to come back in. I think we're missing Webster a lot, not from a defensive standpoint, from an attacking standpoint, because he was very pivotal in our early games and started to build up the play from the back. And I really think we're missing that. I'm wondering whether Graham will be toying with the idea of having McAllister as more of a part of the team earlier in the game. McAllister should have come on for me in about the 65th minute yesterday. He turned things around a little bit. He was that controlling central mid-forward magician that we needed to break down Norwich. So we'll see if he comes in.
Yeah, I think results aside and bits and pieces like that, you just hope that we make a good account of ourselves and like try and play our game, or don't get overrun by this team that have spent more on two players than our stadium entirely cost.
That makes it worse. Saying it like
I was
that.
trying to one up you there. I'm glad I
you did. You really did.
But that's the level, right? We talked about Newcastle and their investments earlier. In terms of what we're up against here. You go and beat Brentford away. You go and win at Watford at home, and you get a point against Norwich. We are fourth in the Premier League, but there are levels and bits to this league, and this is one of those games where it's I don't say damage limitation, but if you play your own game and you try and be proactive rather than, sort of 11 men behind the ball and try and, escape a point, I think that's pretty dim viewing. We beat them last year. I think we can take the game to them as long as we play our game. Like Adam said, don't get embarrassed. I think, that'll be enough for me personally.
Yeah, I agree with you both. I was saying the other day to someone else, they were like, "Oh, you're expecting to get 6 points from 6?" I was like, "I will bite your hand off for 2." two draws here would be incredible results given who they are and our continued growth. We have no right to either of them. They both, both Manchester City and Liverpool should be beating us. Liverpool looked on a different planet yesterday. That's the best I've seen them for some time.
Salah's in superb form.
Superb.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Like, you just have to marvel at how he's playing at the moment.
One thing I will just say to counter everything that we just said is that I'll give myself some credit, because once in every 1,000 stupid points that I make, sometimes there's one or two okay ones. And I said Norwich worry me and they could be a slip-up game for us. And I said that we play in a way at the moment where you don't need to beat us. In some ways, we'll beat ourselves. And that case in point is that Josh Sargent chance with Sanchez yesterday. We could easily have lost that game. The difference when you play someone like a City is we don't get to play that pushed up 70% possession game and get hit on the counter. They will control the game. We won't get a choice over that. We'll try and do it in fits and starts. But it means we then get to see potentially what Cucurella and Lamptey can do on a break against City and use some of the pace that we have on the wings, sit back with 3 players sat in front of our back 3/5 and see what we can do. That might present a slightly different scenario than what we've seen in these last 2 games, where we just haven't looked like really scoring properly.
Yeah, and it's these games that I feel we played best in because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't seem to have the personnel to carve teams apart that sit back, but we sure as hell have the personnel to be able to totally ruin a team's day when they're so used to being able to dominate possession as well. And it's not even so much on the counter. There's just a style about the way we play where we just totally put them off their game, that high press especially. And I expect to see a lot of that tomorrow. I expect to see huge gap, not tomorrow, next week. I expect to see huge gaps in the midfield because we're going to have 3 or 4 men around the box for Edison, and we're going to have the rest of them on the halfway line to prevent that break. And I think we're just going to swarm them. And they're capable of playing through the midfield, and they can do what they want. And I think that Potter will seed them that. And I think his battle is going to be winning both thirds and letting them roll the middle of it without a worry. Because he did that in 2 previous games, and it's worked really well. So it's going to be an interesting one because we are down on staff as well. Bissouma plays next week, and it's a very different feeling. I genuinely go into that game thinking we could take a point. Without him, I'm of the opinion that I would be happy just not to concede 4 or 5.
And the other thing, though, is that, look, I'm looking at the table right now. Unless Spurs score 6 goals in the next 40 minutes or so against Newcastle, they might, based on what I'm currently seeing. Half time now. then we're sat in fourth. We're sat in fourth. We're sandwiched between the two Manchester clubs. On a Tottenham have just gone above. Like Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester City, Brighton and Hove Albion, Tottenham Hotspur, Manchester United. All right, I'll take that. If you read that table to me a few weeks ago, I'll take that.
Yep.
I think that was the silver lining of yesterday, right? You know, we said, you know, Norwich can be a slip up game to Adam's point. You know, we do struggle sometimes against breaking those sort of teams down. But you're telling us we're 17th of October, we're sitting fourth in the league after 8 games. Like, you know, there's no way anyone could have thought of that.
And looking at the table, even if we lose these next 2, the odds of us being bottom half are very low. Like, we're still going to be in the top 10, even if we get beat by the 2 best teams in the country. So, you know, there's a lot of reasons to be cheerful. Even more so when before the international break, we all agreed that we're still looking at those points for survival for first and foremost. And we have the luxury of watching teams like Watford play with their new manager boost and having 5 put past them comfortably. Burnley are who they thought they were for the last 3 years. It seems like that prophecy is finally fulfilling itself. And you know, I'm also of the opinion that Newcastle can throw as much money as they want in January. If they're 15 to 20 points adrift, they look bad. Like they look appalling.
Well,
and if they keep losing games,
when we face them in 2 weeks,
Yep.
they're after the Liverpool game.
Yeah, they are.
They might be managed by Steven Gerrard, Antonio Conte. We don't know. No one.
And they've got Palace and Chelsea in between. Palace away. You know, I know that everybody thinks they're going to be safe, especially Newcastle fans now. They're going to get, £190 million invested in January, they're saying. I tell you, if they're as far adrift as I think they're going to be in that bottom 3, doesn't matter how much money you throw at it. It's going to be a long, hard slog from January onwards, especially if you end up signing those players in the second part, like the latter half of January. I don't think it's as clear-cut as people seem to think it is that they're going to be fine.
How funny would it be if they went down? Oh, God, it'd be wonderful.
It'd be amazing.
That would be
wonderful stuff.
I mean, just in terms of you look at the table and you're looking from the bottom down. Other sort of teams, you know, we talked about how high up Brentford are, but you're also talking about how low Leeds are right now. You know, we often talk about second season syndrome, and you know, we saw it with Sheffield United, you know, coming 8th, and then all of a sudden everyone knew what they were about. So you get the idea. I'm not saying they're going to be anywhere near it, but I'm saying 1 win and 4 draws out of 8 games is vastly different to last year. And if they don't start to get those results, they could be pulled into that bottom 6 or 7 that we typically see fighting against each other, especially with the result yesterday.
And they've got a couple of massive games coming up. They've got Wolves at home, Arsenal, and then Norwich. You know,
they have to get something from those.
If they're not picking up points from there, I think you can safely say at that point they're part of that bottom chunk. And I think you smashed it in terms of the Sheffield United comparison and the second season syndrome stuff. This is a team that are second in the league for yellow cards. They're just outright not operating correctly. And they've not lost any of their play. Calvin Phillips is still playing almost every minute, you know, like these big players that are supposed to be their star players. Stuart Dallas, who was incredible last year, still playing almost every minute. Rafinha, who looked amazing last year, missed 1 game, which was this one. You know, it's not like they've changed their personnel, and they've added a couple of players that are supposed to be very good. You know, they've signed Jack Harrison on a permanent. They've signed that fella from Barcelona. I think you're right. And I'm not at all surprised by it, if I'm honest. A team like that plays as gung-ho as they do is always going to be subject to problems at some point in a Premier League like this, because the teams that are in and around them, like your Burnleys and your Watfords, even like your Southamptons, your Palaces, they know exactly how to build out and stop you from performing well. And you have to be incredibly on your game to be able to even beat teams like that at that point. And we're seeing it with Brighton.
Yeah, and I'm by no means saying that we can't be part of that bottom chunk, because we have been for the last 4 years. But we know what it's like. And I think you give 12, 13 games in, you start to see, as we said, the Premier League table formalizing in terms of where and whereabouts you expect those teams to be. So you look at it right now, you get a good indication. I normally look at it after 10, we're 8 in. So, just a point that, the next couple of games could define where actually you might end up in the table from an area perspective at the very least.
Cool.
I got one other thing to add, not on this topic, but I want to flash to everyone's favourite conversation topic, which is the Belgian Jupiler Pro League.
I love a bit of Belgian Pro League.
Yeah, because we've caught ourselves in a bit of a weird dichotomy where we've loaned a couple of players out to the Belgian league, in which Matoma is currently starring for the team at the top of the league, and poor Moises Caicedo is on loan at a club rock bottom of the league. Matoma scored a hat-trick yesterday, I believe.
In 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Came on at halftime with 10 men. They played with 10 men for the entire second half too. And they were 2-0 down.
Remind me what position he currently plays in?
It's a left winger.
I think so.
Who are we missing at the moment? Left winger. Interesting.
The whole USG thing is all very interesting. Obviously, just getting into the league last year, to now 10 games in, top of the league. You start looking at that, and how convenient is it that to play European football in the Belgian league gets you a work permit a lot quicker. So then there might be a plan in place that has been there for a few years. But it's good to see Matoma probably finding his feet and obviously scoring goals. The left winger is duly what we need, and hopefully next year the formalities can be completed.
And what's mad is this is a team that, like you said, just came up last season, barely changed. They haven't made a huge amount of signings. The Dennis Undav fella shot them up the leagues. The Van Zier guy also was hugely important in coming up. They've got a couple of players in that centre midfield, the Teddy Tuma fellow, whatever his name is. Like, these are all players that were vital to promotion, and now they're kind of cruising at the top of the league, where you don't see that happen in any top division. That's not something you see anywhere usually, especially unless they've had like massive amounts of investment, and they clearly haven't, because they're playing with the same squad. It's just mad how Tony Bloom is able to just, whatever he touches seems to turn to gold. I can't imagine how thrilled the USG fans must be, because this isn't some new club. This is a very old, very well-established football team in Belgium that have had highs and lows, and it seems like they are about to hit an insane high.
Recruitment and the setup at this club is continually proving to be fantastic.
Awesome. That's about it then, boys. We've covered a lot. Some good, some bad, some controversial. And we will be back next week for Manchester City review. It could be a grim one. Who knows? But yeah, if you've got nothing else, I will let you get back to your day, and we'll wrap up.
Hoping for a goal next week. Just a goal would be great.
Yeah, me too. Well, thank you so much. I'll speak to you guys later.
Cheers, guys.
All right, cheers, boys.